Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company at Watches and Wonders 2025. This is the big one, guys. It's Grand Seiko. I'm here with Joe Kirk, the longtime brand curator for Grand Seiko in the United States, the most knowledgeable person alive when it comes to this brand. Trust me, he's the right man for the job. Joe, explain to me real quick, because a lot of people sort of wonder where this supernova Grand Seiko came from. What was what you consider the official relaunch of Grand Seiko internationally?
So, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in some capacity with Grand Seiko since it was launched globally in 2010 when at Basel World, Mr. Hattori made the public statement that Grand Seiko was going global. Honestly, I think that in 2017 when we announced that Grand Seiko was becoming an independent brand from Seiko, changed everything. And it was so much more than just replacing the Seiko logo with the Grand Seiko logo at the top. It was a change in management, marketing, distribution, everything, just kind of worked. And from there, the trajectory has just kept going. And it's really exciting, and we keep pushing to, kind of grow our brand slowly, of course, and controlled. But, it's been an exciting ride, to say the least.
Now, I would say that Grand Seiko, probably more than any other brand over the last 4 years, has really seen a whirlwind of development of new dials, cases, model lines, and movements. And some of these are deeply impressive in as much as they kind of go in directions you never probed before. We have a really interesting melding this year of the traditional VFA signature, so very fine adjustments, super accurate watches, now in the world of Spring Drive. Talk about how the VFA concept started and how it migrated to Spring Drive.
Yeah, so back in 1969, to go back a little bit further, Grand Seiko started in 1960 just to create the ultimate practical watch. Precision was everything, right? That's the first step in making a great practical watch to wear every day. And so, we introduced the Grand Seiko standard 6 years later to exceed the chronometer standard, and then we pursued even higher, degree of pedigree, let's say, and introduced VFA, right, very fine adjusted. So that was accurate back in 1969 at plus or minus a minute a month, which was, hard to believe that something was possible, that something like that was possible back then. So from there, we wanted to continue to pursue higher elevation, and basically, we started Spring Drive development shortly thereafter, within less than a decade.
Yeah, within 1977.
Correct, yeah. So the dream was born in 1977, but took him quite a few years. So the engineer's name was Yoshikazu Akahane, and Akahane-san was very dedicated to bringing this to life. But after the first prototype, which occurred in 1982, which he could only get like a 3-hour power reserve on, it was 11 years before he could make his next step to 10-hour power reserve in 93. So that was a big challenge, obviously, was power consumption, energy efficiency, and it was another several years before he was able to bring it to life in 1999. So 1999 was just a small series of limited edition, only sold in Japan, though. So Spring Drive hit the market really in 2004 with the introduction of 9R in Grand Seiko.
And it was in the mid-2000s that we first saw Spring Drive in automatic. So
Yes.
now, I always like to review watches from the inside out, so to speak. Let's talk a little bit about this new VFA 9R. So this is now going to be a watch whose accuracy is rated on an annual basis as opposed to months. So previously, Spring
Yes.
Drive would have been 15 to 10 seconds a month based on the standard of the crystal, the oscillator, some of the peripheral engineering. Now we're talking about 20 seconds a year with this new 9R.
Yes, so 9R 65 attained the highest accuracy of any watch powered by a mainspring back in 2004 at 15 seconds per month. And so we continue to pursue higher accuracy. 2020 we made a big breakthrough with our caliber 9RA, which introduced temperature compensation for the first time in Spring Drive, which is a huge power consumer. So we had to figure out how to downsize the power consumption of our silicone insulated integrated circuit that we were using. So that was a big step, and then we packaged at the same time the quartz oscillator in that package. We were able to fine tune it to 10 seconds a month, but this year obviously we figured out how to surpass that. So this new introduction that we're featuring this year, that's kind of our halo product, we're calling now UFA as opposed to VFA, standing for ultra fine accuracy. So the ultra fine accuracy, can't call it very fine adjusted because you're not necessarily adjusting the hairspring like you would on one of the conventional models from the 60s and 70s.
It's a different approach.
Yeah, definitely a different approach, but Really, to hit this level of annual accuracy, we had to look at the way that we were manufacturing and processing the quartz oscillator. So essentially, we wanted to improve the process to improve the traits of the crystal oscillator.
Now, it's important to remember that the aged crystal oscillator, 3 years, is what goes into these UFAs. So VFA becomes UFA, the crystal is aged, but there's another long-term provision in here. In the short term, we are talking about timing tolerances of 20 seconds a year, but in the long term, there is a drift to quartz crystals, and this is now the first spring drive that has a drift adjuster, so you can actually compensate for the drift of the crystal and maintain that precision over decades.
Exactly, yeah. So as you mentioned, this drift can occur, but it takes a very, very long time, as you said, decades. So let's say 30 years from now, your UFA is starting to drift a little, and you want to get it fine-tuned within regulation. We have what we call the regulation switch, which controls that drift, let's say, and we can fine-tune the accuracy similar to what we're doing, what we would do with a mechanical watch, right?
Yes.
So it's little plus-minus symbol. You adjust the lever instead of adjusting it by seconds per day. You're adjusting by fractions of seconds per year.
So now we have smaller case sizes here. So I believe this is the SLGB, am I wrong?
Correct.
SLGB?
No, SLGB.
This is the 001 in platinum. This is limited edition, 80 pieces. And then right here we have the 003. This is unlimited. This is steel. This is going to be 37 millimeters in each case. And what is the pricing roughly for these two watches?
So in platinum will be $39,000, and like you said, limited to 80 pieces. And then in the high intensity titanium, we're going to have.
I'm so sorry, it's titanium. I apologize, Grand Seiko.
It's all good. So $10,900 for the high intensity titanium.
Okay, so a smaller case size now, 37 millimeters. Is this something that is a response to collectors, or is it just what you felt like?
In a sense, so I think that size is always a thought, and we try to downsize as much as possible. We want to make a comfortable watch. Grand Seiko, like I said, is all about practicality, and comfort is a huge part of that. So not everyone wants a 40 millimeter or even 43 or 38. So we wanted to try and downsize Spring Drive, but obviously Spring Drive has a lot of components, requires a very high level of durability and longevity for the components. So our parts might be a little bit thicker, or may contribute to a little bit of an oversized, let's say, caliber in some instances. Now, we made some big strides with the Caliber 9RA back in 2020, utilizing like our one-piece center bridge to enhance the rigidity, and then also our offset magic lever to reduce the height. So in that, we also introduced a 5-day power reserve, which used dual size barrels.
Yes. And that still applies at 37 millimeters?
No, so in order to reduce the size, one of the steps we had to make was removing one of those barrels, essentially. So we changed to a single barrel system to achieve 3-day power reserve, just as we've had in the past, and now downsized to 37 millimeters wide by 11.4 thick.
So now you do have a power reserve indicator on the back of the watch. That was a common refrain from collectors in the previous generation of Spring Drive. It was always a very quirky dial side mount. Now it's on the case back, so it's sort of a victory for everyone. People who want the indicator and people who don't necessarily want to see it on the dial. And you have made a lot of the dial. We'll jump to the new clasp in a moment, but tell me a little bit, walk me through kind of the natural inspiration of these dials.
So in Nagano Prefecture, where we make Spring Drive, there's this beautiful area known as the Kirigamine Highlands, and in the winters, obviously it gets very cold. This is a very renowned area for like skiing and snowboarding, and it's kind of a dry area, so the snowfall real light and airy, hence the like snowflake as an example, right? So a lot of snow and frost inspired models coming out of Shinshu area. And so with this ice forest, as we're kind of nicknaming it unofficially the dial, is the source of inspiration. So in this instance, we were talking about, prior to the video conversation, we were talking about the actual carving process of dial patterns. And so basically what we're doing is we're carving the mold to press into the dial and create the texture. And then we're utilizing silver plating as well as blue lacquering to achieve the color. So on the platinum model, it'll be a true light blue, where silver blue on the high intensity titanium.
And these are both 10 ATM, so 100-meter watches. So if you put them on the right strap, these are very versatile. And along those lines, because people are going to want to wear these full-time, maybe even in a sporting capacity, let's talk a little bit about the new clasp, because for a lot of folks, this is basically the answer to the prayers, a fully revised Grand Seiko clasp with a lot of functionality. Tell me about that.
So, you know, I mean, we've had the request for micro-adjustable clasp for many years now, and you know, it's something that fit perfectly for that ideal practical watch, again, to make it more comfortable. So, you know, problem is Grand Seiko's high longevity and durability standard. And if you think about it, you know, you're gonna use this micro-adjustable clasp to change. You could be using it daily, or you just could be fidgety and want to play with it, and it's gonna have, you know, a pretty high wear and tear, let's say, over time. So we wanted to make sure that we prevented that from happening. And so from an engineering perspective, we needed to figure out how to make this a highly long-lasting clasp without any need for you know, servicing. But we also, you know, should something happen, we wanted to make it easily serviceable. So that's a nice added benefit of this design, but it took us time to get there. Now, of course, you know, in the world of watchmaking, you know, I'm sure even without looking at what other brands are doing, there are some roadblocks by other brands' intellectual property that could have caused delays in our process. But finally, you know, we're very happy to introduce this to the market. So.
Excellent. So I think it's important, since we do have both spring drive and mechanical watches on the table, one of the most puzzling questions surrounding the Grand Seiko brand and its history for collectors and newcomers alike is the bifurcation of production and the lineage that led to separate workshops for quartz and spring drive, and then for mechanical on the other side. So here we've got a watch that is mechanical, that would have come from the Shizuku Ishii studio, and this is in Morioka, whereas these are up in Nagano Prefecture. This is in Shiojiri, this is Shinshu. How is it that there are two almost autonomous branches to the same company?
Yeah, it's so this is kind of going back in time, back to the, you know, early days of, let's say, Seikosha, our factories, right? We had Daini Seikosha back in, you know, established back in 1937, which was specialized in wristwatches after the original Seikosha was more focused on pocket watches and clocks. So they were also making some wristwatches, but that was more the specialty of Daini, which meant second Seikosha. And then eventually we opened another plant in the Nagano prefecture, nicknamed Shinshu, or also known as Suwa. And so that was a division of the same company. Eventually it merged with another manufacturing plant that we were you know, involved with, that became Suwa Seikosha on its own, no longer associated with Daini Seikosha. So at that point, that's when, you know, Grand Seiko was born in Suwa in 1960, and we started to eventually utilize Daini Seikosha for Grand Seiko in 1967. And so there was a little bit of a competition there, where Daini Seikosha was a little more focused on thinner and, you know, heavily design, you know, influence, and where Suwa was always kind of pursuing, you know, the next step of innovation, let's say. Though they were both incredibly innovative.
And just for the record, Suwa is going to be what is today up in Shiojiri in Nagano. So that's where today the quartz and the spring drive are made. So let's jump real quick to this watch, because this is another example of a watch coming into the catalog at a smaller case size. I believe this is 36.5.
Correct.
SBGW 323. This is a watch that is very versatile. You can see that it's got a size just about anyone can wear and enjoy. Do you consider a watch like this to be sort of the bedrock of the collection?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this price point has always, you know, kind of been renowned in Grand Seiko. You get you know, a lot of watch for your money, but at the same time, you know, I think that as we're moving, you know, a little bit up market with our Evolution 9 collection, I think that, you know, this is still the peak of interest for people is kind of moving upwards. So
this is maybe a point of entry now to the brand.
Exactly.
Whereas this would have been the mainstream model 5-6 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
so
9S64 automatic, 72-hour power reserve on this?
Correct. Absolutely.
So this is a watch that can get it all done. Again, you've got that 100-meter water resistance. And the dial here, it's sort of like a scatter of pink and silver. What is the nomenclature?
So this is our Mount Iwate pattern. So it's based on the ridges of Mount Iwate as you were to see above. Let's say you were in a helicopter floating above Mount Iwate, radiating out of the center. And then the source of inspiration for the color comes from the actual prefectural state flower, the prefectural flower of Iwate, which is known as kiri, or Paulina flower. So this kiri flower is light, actually purple. And so in the dial process for this, you know, it's a very heavily silver dial with a subtle accent of this light purple.
You know, that's the thing about Grand Seiko. They always have a fun story about every watch. You go to the other brands, you're like, so why did you choose a green dial? And the answer is, because they did it. You know. They really have a wonderful local character to all the watches. A little bit of an unusual discovery was that when the Tentagraph launched, I was surprised to learn that was the first automatic mechanical chronograph sold by Grand Seiko.
Yeah.
I think because of Seiko's heritage in mechanical chronographs, column wheel, vertical clutch, automatics, they were a real innovator on that side, but it didn't necessarily carry over to Grand Seiko, where we typically saw spring drive harnessed for that purpose. Tell me a little bit about the development of the Tentagraph system, and then we'll talk about the SLGC. I guess this is the 007 right here?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So Tentagraph, you know, the idea for creating a mechanical chronograph was obviously always there, but there's a lot of challenges that come with making a mechanical chronograph that is highly accurate. So, you know, in terms of how we wanted to approach, we thought high beat was obviously the way to go. We are firm believers in 36,000 vibrations per hour. But power consumption obviously is high, and as soon as you start the stopwatch, you're drawing power away from the balance. And that is not good for performance. And we're not going to introduce a chronograph that if you're telling the time is accurate, but you start the stopwatch, all of a sudden you're losing. We didn't want that to happen, so we needed to really, you know, think about how that would be possible. You know, looking back, spring drive was kind of the ideal movement because there is no loss of amplitude to the balance by starting the stopwatch, and it continues to roll on. For mechanical, it wasn't until that we introduced that 9S-A5 caliber that we considered potentially making a chronograph. So the dual impulse escapement is so energy efficient, right? You got a high frequency of 36,000 vibrations per hour, you have a long power reserve of 80 hours, and we thought this might be the best platform. So we started developing this new Tentagraph caliber, the 10-beat 3-day automatic chronograph based on 9S-A5. However, it's not just the same base movement you would find in 9S-A5. Obviously, you have to kind of mill, you know, a different main plate, and there's a lot of obvious other features that we need to consider when making this. But one of the things that I found most interesting when we introduced this is we opted for modular design. Now, a lot of people may look down on modular, and I understand why. Typically, they're not as energy efficient as integrated, and typically, you know, it does increase the size. But there's, you know, a lot of drawbacks that we found all the answers to. So in the modular chronograph, the reason we chose it was for the after-sale service. So when we look at a watch, similar to like we did with UFA, right? Now we have the pacing switch or the regulation switch. That allows us an ease of service, you know, whether it's 30 years down the road or more, right? With Tentagraph, we want this to be serviceable at any of our, you know, official service centers, and we don't want you to have to send it back to Japan. So that's the big consideration, is the ease of serviceability. So modular in that sense. Then on top of that, the only other reason we would opt for modular in this instance is because of the dual impulse escapement. We have figured out that the loss of amplitude of the balance is almost nothing compared to not just any other modular chronograph, but also compared to integrated.
Now that's very important because with the 9S-A5, you got a new 2-barrel movement, a bigger caliber. I would say aesthetically, a significant step up, as this was a consideration from the beginning, both in terms of finishing and architecture. You still got the column wheel, you've still got the vertical clutch, but you've got that double impulse where you, I believe, have both a direct and an indirect impulse.
Correct, yeah.
And the friction of each is less than a conventional sliding lever would be.
Absolutely.
So it's not just that there is now a mechanical automatic winding Grand Seiko chronograph. It's an entirely new movement built from the ground up, and it was built with complications in mind. So I would say probably this 007 is maybe a more traditional Grand Seiko style. I think if you're familiar with a 9S continuity and their most contemporary collections, not necessarily heritage designs, but what we've seen over the last few decades, this will be the more familiar of the two. Yeah. Whereas going here, with the SLGC009, now we have a much more modern, unabashedly forward-looking, I would even say maybe machine ethic with this watch. Grand Seiko has a long history of polyhedron cases, 44GS, 62GS, and this is really in that tradition.
Yes, indeed. So, you know, the previous model, the 007 that we're looking at, is Evolution 9 collection, which is based on Grand Seiko style established in 1967. We just evolved it to today's modern world, a little more brushed, a little more you know, focused on comfort and, you know, It's taking the 9 rules of Grand Seiko and bending them a little bit, not breaking them. With this still follows that same concept in terms of Grand Seiko style, but is incredibly bold, aggressive, and I mean these dynamic planes that you see intersecting all across the case are what I like to say are Zaratsu polisher's worst nightmare. Right? It's the more wide the surface is, the harder it is to get it perfectly even and attain that distortion-free mirror finish. On top of that, we're utilizing our relatively new brilliant hard titanium. You maybe recall we use on the Kodo Constant Force Tourbillon.
Yes.
You can look at it next to platinum. It looks virtually the same, and also it has twice the hardness of stainless steel.
And I would also say that it's important to note just how completely realized this design is, because you look at the dial and the dial strakes continue unbroken into the cut of the chronograph pushers. You've got differential finish of polish and satin. The planes break as sharp as a razor away from each other. And then you've got I mean, I'm not going to name names, but there's a famous sports watch manufacturer with a very sort of rounded, cambered case back, and this achieves that too. So while this is a 43mm case, the actual lug-to-lug is very constrained, and there's no impediment to the motion of the strap. It pulls right down out of the lugs, so it wears true to its lug-to-lug dimension. It doesn't feel like a 43 on the wrist. I can attest to that. Yeah,
it's a 50-50, or 50 lug to lug length. So, and plus with the curvature, it's totally wearable. I mean, you know, obviously width and thickness are people's personal preference, but you know, I'm confident that anyone could pull it off.
A very hardcore watch too. 200 meters water resistant. You don't see many 200-meter watches that aren't expressly marketed as divers. So sometimes luxury is about getting more than you need and more than you knew you needed. So Joe, a real quick question, because you are a rare lifer at a brand who eats, lives, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. If people want to reach out to you and learn more about Grand Seiko, how do they find you?
You know, I'm at Josep, JOSEP.Kirk, K-I-R-K, at, you know, on Instagram. Easy way to find me. I'm fairly active on there. That's, you know, probably the best and easiest way to track me down.
If you have a Grand Seiko question and he doesn't have the answer, no one does. Joe, thank you so much.
Tim, total pleasure. Great to see you. Thank you so much
for coming on.